Hello, and welcome to the midweek episode of Views of an Outsider, The Outsider's View from February 3rd. We're going to start off with all the stories involving politicians being stupid in the hopes of going viral and succeeding. Let's start with Chuck Schumer. He is very upset about having a government that is getting things done for the people right away and being effective for a change. So he offered an alternative point of view on this by saying that Trump has been in office for a whole week now, and eggs still cost too much because of the bird flu. Yes, that was the best complaint that he could muster. And it was so important that it required a press statement for him to inform us of this. That way, we would become outraged by this clear demonstration that the entire administration is already and will continue to be a complete and dismal failure. Yeah, that's not unhinged in any way, shape, or form. Way to look normal to the center out there, my dude. Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey was sentenced to 11 years in prison for, quote, one of the most brazen corruption schemes in history, in the words of the prosecutors. He accepted bribes totaling in excess of $1 million, securing deals from Egypt and Qatar. His connection for the Egypt deal became a multi-millionaire overnight as a result of his corruption, and he has also been sentenced. In his own defense, Menendez said that he's done more good than bad. This pillar of the Democrat Party is now appealing to Trump, saying that he too is a victim of a corrupt justice system. So that's misinformation when it's your enemy, but it's a true conspiracy when it's you see. Yeah, don't hold your breath for a response there, Senator. But look on the bright side, dude. Maybe you can have a faux family reunion with the other famous Menendezes who are in prison. Careful, though. They've got daddy issues. New York is trying to mandate that employers give sick days to healthy employees that need to stay home and take care of a sick pet. Okay. I say let Democrat districts drive all the businesses out to other states, make their cities completely unlivable until they have no people there and no businesses left to tax. The Republican states will be happy to cannibalize your electoral votes after the next census. We'll just eventually recolonize you when you've completely collapsed. But in the meantime, we aren't going to pay our money to clean up the messes of your crappy decision-making. So just know that right now. If you vote in idiots who tax you into oblivion while providing nothing in return for all that money like California has done, and even cut the necessities like fire departments, and your city burns down too, then I suggest you learn from the reality on the ground and consider making saner choices in the future, like the rest of us already do. Or it's not going to be our problem to fix. Step up to a little adult responsibility for a change. It's time for some tough love. In the Senate, Democrats filibustered a bill that proposed to stop all-American funding to the wildly corrupt and openly anti-Semitic International Criminal Court. 54 senators voted in favor of sanctions, and 42 House Democrats also supported this. Chuck Schumer, the official Jewish beard of the Democrat Party, spearheaded a vague resistance to stop the bill for no discernible reason. So, if you're someone who has Democrat senators representing you, take note of the people who filibustered this and make your feelings known in the 2026 midterm elections, when a lot of these seats will be coming up for election, and make the appropriate changes where needed. That's how democracies work. Although these people are not technically politicians, they are definitely their loyal propagandists, so that's close enough. New York Magazine tried to say that an inauguration party in D.C. was exclusively white. Yeah, and the Madison Square Garden rally was a Nazi rally, we know. They denigrated the women there as being, quote, out of their league. That sounds a little misogynistic to me. So the pro-women libs are now going to put down young women who take pride in themselves, dress up, and step into their place in society instead of piercing their faces and making an account on OnlyFans where they can prostitute themselves to the world, thus stacking the odds against themselves for the rest of their life of ever getting somewhere admirable, all before they know what they're doing. The Democrat message is now being a young person who has their shit together is getting above yourself. I can't imagine why you're losing all the young people. The photo they used to prove that this was an all-white party, which was the sum total of their complaint, too many white people in the same room, was cropped to cut out the 3 black people who are just on the edge of their chosen frame. You can see the unedited photos online. One of the hosts of this party was black. Lying doesn't work so well now that there's community notes, does it, legacy media? Keep cementing your reputation as blatant liars on behalf of your cause and see where both of you end up. You're already terminal, but hey, chug poison on your way out. Jim Acosta has quit CNN after they were going to move him to the middle of the night. But he left us a final inspiring message. Let's listen.
One final message. Don't give in to the lies. Don't give in to the fear. Hold on to the truth and to hope. Even if you have to get out your phone, record that message. I will not give in to the lies. I will not give in to the fear. Post it on your social media so people can hear from you too. I'll have more to say about my plans in the coming days, but until then, I want to thank all of you for tuning in. It has been an honor to be welcomed into your home for all these years. That's the news. Reporting from Washington, I'm Jim Acosta.
Okay, I give it -3 points for being delusional, -5 points for being weird, and -10 points for being pathetic. It's not exactly as stirring as Braveheart, but bye. We all rushed out immediately to video ourselves talking to ourselves saying, remember self, don't give in to the lies and the fear. And then we all rushed to social media to post our mental problems for the whole world. Actually, no one did that. Just you. You're one of those weird people that refers to yourself in the third person, aren't you? MSNBC wanted to compete for weirdest nut job, so they held a forum to decide who could lead the DNC into the future. And all of the panelists raised their hands to indicate agreement when they were asked the question, did they think that Kamala lost the election because of racism and misogyny? Here's that clip.
5 minutes left in this round, so I'm going to have a show of hands. How many of you believe that racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat? Okay.
Everyone's laughing. Only a couple people are clapping.
So, that's good. You all pass.
Yes, you all pass because you all toe the party line. It's not you. It's the American people. Keep preaching that. See it where it gets you. Also, their favorite darling, the infamous grifter, Abram X. Kendi, was given $10 million to do research on anti-racism and produced not even one drop of research with that money. After stealing that money, he has now closed his research center and moved his grift to Howard University. Also not a politician, but definitely qualifying as going viral for doing stupid stunts, Selena Gomez made a spectacle of herself by deliberately working herself up into sobbing tears, setting up a camera and filming it, editing it, and posting it on Instagram. She can't, however, understand why we don't find that to be authentic behavior. In the video, she sobbed that her people are being deported. But that's not true. Mexican people aren't being deported. Every legal immigrant from Mexico is completely safe. She used crying because illegal immigrants aren't being exempted from the consequences of breaking the law. She's upset that Mexicans aren't above the consequences of breaking the law simply by virtue of being Mexican, the way she thinks they should be. Law-abiding Mexicans and legal immigrants from other countries aren't being targeted in any way. She sobbed over the children who are being deported with their parents. But aren't you opposed to family separations? So your answer is that if you have kids and break the law, you should just be exempt from being dealt with and allowed to stay. Hispanic Americans responded to her video by saying, quote, "Shut up, stupid." The response caused her to delete the video, and she posted a self-righteous, enraged message saying that apparently empathy is no longer acceptable. No, sweetheart. Faux empathy that is meant to try and manipulate people is no longer acceptable or effective. Emotional blackmail has had its day, and it's over, which is an interesting and healthy development. Also competing for an Oscar in the category of weird and unconvincing performances is another video that went viral of Anthony Mackie, who is the new black Captain America, saying that Captain America is about many things, but America isn't one of them. Explain the name. He went on to offer the explanation that he never got over someone telling him that there were no dragons in the real world when he was a kid, and that he is still childishly nursing that resentment and rebelling against reality by being an actor where he can still pretend. That actually explains a lot. Thank you. And finally, to wrap up this segment, Meta employees staged the most geeky coup in history against the changes that are being made there towards the center by replacing the tampons and pads that had been removed from the men's bathroom. Apparently, this was an Ocean's 11 style mission where Brad Pitt and George Clooney rappelled down an elevator shaft on cables with backpacks full of tampons, sneaking their way through lasers in the dead of night. So heroic, so brave, and so beautiful. And you should all seek so much therapy. Get a meaningful life for your own sakes and join us out here in the non-cosplay world. Our next segment is on immigration. Colombia, who has received more financial assistance from the United States over the last 50 years than any other country in the Western Hemisphere, refused to accept back their citizens who were deported from the United States for being here illegally. They refused to let the planes carrying them land. They cited the reason that the planes that were used to deport these criminals were inhumane. which is why they made them take 3 flights on them instead of 1. By the way, these were our military planes, so do we treat our military badly when we make them fly on these same planes? Trump immediately ordered a 25% tariff on all goods from Colombia with the promise to raise it again to 50% next week, plus a travel ban and visa revocation for all Colombian officials, visa sanctions against all members of the government and their families and supporters, enhanced border inspections for all Colombian nationals and cargo, plus financial sanctions. And he promised that this was just the start if Colombia refused to accept responsibility for their own citizens who came here illegally and the criminals that the Colombian government sent here to get rid of them. Literally, within minutes of Trump's announcement, minutes, less than an hour later, Colombia caved completely and took its people back and agreed to Trump's terms of completely unrestricted acceptance in the return of all of their illegal aliens without delay. So the threats that Trump made will not be enacted, but he promised that they will be held where they can be signed into law if Colombia fails to honor the agreement. The visa sanctions and extra inspections on the border had already been issued, and they will remain in effect until the first plane of deportees is allowed to land. F-A-F-O. Colombia's leader tried to save face by posting some unconvincing, defiant ramblings that were as hysterical as they were incoherent. He said that he liked watching black people and Hispanic people fight each other on the streets of America, but that he doesn't like Trump's oil, although he would be willing to have a whiskey with him, even with his gastritis. And his land is the land of yellow butterflies. You get the idea. Words aside, he got his ass publicly handed to him. The era of weak America is over. We are done being walked all over in order to make little nations feel big and boost their self-esteem. We aren't going to bully anyone. That would be wrong. But try and take advantage of us, and you will find out from now on. Done are the days where you take Americans' money, demand that it protect you with its military and solve all your problems for you, while you spit in the faces of the American people saying, "Don't you dare think you're better than us." No. We aren't obligated to let failed states whose people are fleeing the hellhole that their government created walk all over us. Respect is mutual. If you don't give it, then you aren't going to get it. And we aren't obligated to provide one-way aid with no benefits to us either, by the way. And Trump did all of this on social media between rounds at a golf course. And just for the record, Colombia isn't an ally, as Biden emphatically insisted while insincerely patting them on the head like big boys. The concept of allies goes both ways, not one way. So tell me what Colombia has ever done for the United States besides accept our aid and then give us crap about not taking responsibility for their criminals, while they import socialism and cocaine via the cartels and the violent crimes that goes along with that. Coffee? Lots of places grow good coffee. So keep FAing and you'll keep FOing. Israel is an ally. They reciprocate with technology and a foothold in the Middle East, etc. J.D. Vance was doing the media circuit tour again, and he had a few words to say on CBS about reinstating some real vetting practices.
In
Margaret, I don't agree that all these immigrants or all these refugees have been properly vetted. In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals
but there are
have been properly
30,000
vetted.
people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary concern as the Vice President, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we have vetting problems with a lot of these refugee programs, we absolutely cannot unleash thousands of unvetted people into our country.
These people are vetted.
Good.
These people are vetted.
Just like the guy who planned a terrorist attack in Oklahoma a few months ago, he was allegedly properly vetted, and many people in the media and the Democratic Party said that he was properly vetted. Clearly he wasn't. I don't want my children to share a neighborhood with people who are not properly vetted, and because I don't want it for my kids, I'm not going to force any other American citizens' kids to do that either.
No, and that was a very particular case. It wasn't clear if he was radicalized when he got here or while he was living here.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
Yeah, I don't really care either, Margaret. At this point, Margaret broke out the cliches of, well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country founded by immigrants.
Well, this is a country founded by... This is a very unique country, and it was founded by some immigrants and some settlers, but just because we were founded by immigrants doesn't mean that 240 years later that we have to have the dumbest immigration policy in the world.
Mm-hmm. So then Margaret brought the Catholic Church into it because Vance is Catholic, and that didn't work either.
Let me ask this question, Margaret. Let's separate the immigration issue. If you had a violent murderer in a school, of course I want law enforcement to go and get that person out.
Of course.
So what's the point of the question?
You changed the regulation this week. That's the point of the question.
Exactly.
Giving the authority to go into churches and go into schools.
We empowered law enforcement to enforce the law
has
everywhere to protect Americans.
Effect, a chilling effect, arguably, to people to not send their kids to school.
I desperately hope it has a chilling effect on illegal immigrants coming into our country.
You think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops are actively hiding criminals?
I think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has frankly not been a good partner in common sense immigration enforcement that the American people voted for.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The Vatican doesn't dictate United States immigration policy. And by the way, if they really believe what they preach, how about tearing down that wall around Vatican City, Mr. Pope? Yeah, I didn't think so. Adam Schiff decided to side with stupid. Here's that. He said that deporting illegal immigrants for petty crimes like theft is government overreach, because apparently the country will be better off if we deliberately import criminals. Here's his case.
Look, the administration already has the authority to detain people that have committed violent crimes for deportation, and they should. But this bill is so broad that if you're a dreamer and you take a tube of toothpaste from the store, you can be detained for deportation. That, to me, is a terrible overreach.
No, Mr. Schiff, that is the law. We do not need more criminals here. There are good people, law-abiding people, waiting in line the way they have been requested to. Why should a lesser contributor get their place in our country? You know, Konstantin Kisin made a good point about this a while back on Diaries of a CEO podcast. He said, if you're somebody who's wealthy and you own a big home, big enough that you need a staff to run it, you need a cook, you need a housekeeper, you need a gardener, maybe you even need someone to build you an extension on your home. And you select the people that you want to do those jobs based on their qualifications. And you've got that all lined up. And the night before these qualified people, the ones you've chosen and want to do the job, are going to start, a bunch of people that you don't know break into your house. But they don't, do anything bad to you. In fact, now that they've broken in, they're willing to do those jobs for you. Are you good? because most people wouldn't be. They wouldn't be good with being stuck with the people they didn't select, while the qualified people that they actually wanted are out a job. You have the right to choose who comes into your home, and you do have the right to choose who comes into your country. And we should be selecting for people who indicate that they understand the importance of obeying the laws. A 33-country organization led by Honduras is trying to revolt against the United States, sending their citizens back, rather than us just letting their illegal immigrants stay here and be our problem to solve. Brazil is following suit behind Honduras. Good luck with that. FA and you will FO. See how that goes for you. These standards, the standards of taking back your illegal migrants, was the standing deal for decades before Biden. And these last 4 years of insanity are over. Deal with it. We're going back to the rules that have been there for decades, because that's what we're doing. By the way, the number of people coming to the southern border has already cratered just because of the knowledge that they won't be let in and will have to remain in Mexico while we check out their story about asylum, which in many cases will not qualify for asylum, and they know it. So they know it would be a waste of their time to come and wait in a foreign country like Mexico only to be rejected for the false claim they are trying to make. ICE made 1,000 arrests on Saturday and 1,200 arrests on Sunday. Jake Tapper had a problem with this, and Steve Miller was more than happy to assuage his fears.
So, how does President Trump make sure that the effort to deport people who are not in this country legally doesn't end up hurting Americans who want safe borders, absolutely, but also don't want to see even more higher prices in groceries?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it's not your position, Jake, you're just asking the question, that we should supply America's food with exploitative illegal alien labor. I obviously don't think that's what you're implying. Only 1% of alien workers in the entire country work in agriculture. The top destination for illegal aliens are large cities like New York, like Los Angeles, and small industrial towns, of course, all across the heartland, as we've seen with the Biden floods. Mm-hmm. None of those illegal aliens are doing farm work. Those 30,000 illegal aliens that Joe Biden dumped into Springfield.
I'm talking about the ones that are.
But I'm explaining this. It's important to understand.
No, you're kind of changing the subject. I mean, I will give me 30 minutes. I'll go as deep as you want this. We don't have
you and your audience.
I'm talking about the ones that work in the agriculture industry.
I'm
you can
explaining
come back
to you
and we
your
can talk
audience.
about the ones in the cities. I swear.
I'll do the whole answer. The illegal aliens that Joe Biden brought into our country are not full stop doing farm work. They are not. The illegal aliens he brought in from Venezuela, from Haiti, from Nicaragua, they are not doing farm work. They are in our cities collecting welfare.
MSNBC can always be counted on to be hysterical.
As we come on the air, the old saying, elections have consequences, is playing out in very real time, in a very real way, in cities all across our country, as the Trump administration makes good on one of Trump's most controversial campaign promises, a promise that was immortalized in that sea of signs at the Republican National Convention: mass deportations now. 1 week into Trump's second term, it's no longer an abstract idea or controversial campaign promise or even a convention sign. The deportations are underway.
Yes, and that's what we voted for, sweetheart. Unfortunately for you, this isn't a controversial issue, according to the polls. You just wish it was. But the vast majority of Americans support this. They voted for Trump because he promised to do this. It's you who doesn't get it. We knew what we were voting for. We just don't agree with you. I know that possibility is beyond what you can wrap your mind around, but there it is. We weren't tricked. We don't agree with you. And your claims that the only people who support this are white supremacists, racists, blah, blah, blah. Explain then why record numbers of black people voted for Trump. Explain why the majority of Hispanic people voted for Trump. So no, darling, it isn't just white people who want this. It's Americans. It's everybody. Except you. CNN threw their 2 cents in, claiming that we will all change our mind about allowing illegal immigrants who murder Americans to be deported when white women can't get their blueberries for their smoothies anymore. No, I'm not joking. That was actually their argument. And they were serious. They weren't being sarcastic. That was serious. Everyone will change their mind when blueberries cost more. Just when I thought you guys couldn't get any more out of touch. Keep wish casting. This week, Trump signed into law the Laken-Riley Act.
I very much especially appreciate the bipartisan support. The Democrats, really a big percentage of them came through, and plenty of them wanted to. They probably felt they couldn't, but they really wanted to. That they don't understand that would have made them a lot more popular, would have made them a lot better with their people. Mm-hmm. The ones that didn't are going to be sorry, because the people are not going to forget that they wouldn't sign. This is a perfect, incredible tribute to an unbelievable young lady.
Yes, she was. And yes, we are going to remember on voting day. Nevertheless, this was signed into law. There was enough support to get it into law, and it is now the law that ICE can arrest illegal immigrants for petty crimes, and it allows states to sue Homeland Security for any harms done to them which are caused by illegal migrants if Homeland Security neglects their duties again, like they have done under the Biden administration. Trump also announced that Gitmo is going to be used to house illegal immigrants who are the worst of the most violent criminals, keeping them well away from the American public. It will hold 30,000 people. Here's that announcement.
Today I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo. This will double our capacity immediately, right? And tough. That's a tough place to get out of.
Gitmo was used this exact way during the 80s and 90s, so I don't see the problem. Here was what Kristi Noem, who is the new head of Homeland Security, had to say about it.
There's already facilities there that are housing illegal immigrants, and it's the worst of the worst that are kept there. Many times those who are sent there are gang members, people that have created terrorist activities in the United States of America and have been a real danger and threat to our people. So what we'll be doing is utilizing our resources to expand the capacity there and to make sure that as we continue to do what President Trump has talked about and in deporting people who are here illegally and are making our streets much more dangerous, is that we're going to utilize Guantanamo Bay to a more expansive purpose, and that we will be going and putting resources there to make sure we have the space to getting people out of this country right away that will make sure our country much more safe.
Trump also floated a similar modification to the penal system. This has not been put into place. This is merely an idea up for consideration. Here's what he had to say about that modification.
They're very dangerous people. They're violent people. I used to say these are more violent than our criminals. In fact, the best part about them is they make our criminals look quite nice, actually, by comparison. They are very violent people. We also have many violent criminals in our country, however, that did not necessarily come here illegally. but have been arrested 30 times, 35 times, 41, 42 times in a couple of cases, 25 times, 18 times, many for murder, other heinous charges such as pushing people into subways. As the train's coming along at 45 miles an hour, boom, you get pushed into the subway. They had it last week. Hitting them in the head with baseball bats while they're not looking, punching old ladies in the face, knocking them unconscious and stealing their purse. They even break into apartments and rape elderly women and beat up elderly men, beat them to hell. And I don't want these violent repeat offenders in our country any more than I want illegal aliens from other countries who misbehave. And I say, and this is subject to getting it approved, but if they've been arrested many, many times, they're repeat offenders by many numbers, I want them out of our country. I also will be seeking permission to do so. We're going to get approval, hopefully, to get them the hell out of our country along with others. Let them be brought to a foreign land and maintained by others for a very small fee as opposed to be maintained in our jails for massive amounts of money, including the private prison companies that charge us a fortune.
As long as there are no true human rights violations that are committed in these places, I'm actually for this. It would only be for repeat offenders who obviously don't care about being sent back to jail in our country, where the jails are pretty cushy by comparison. Deterrence does work. If you increase the consequences, then it's not worth it to the criminals. About 1% of criminals, not 1% of the population, 1% of criminals commit 60% of the crimes. These repeat offenders need to have the stakes raised rather than the rest of us having to deal with the consequences of their bad choices. And maybe it's time for foreign countries to start earning the aid that we send them by doing something for us in return. I think this is a policy that is at least worth having the debate on. That brings us up to the alphabet people. Trump called out FEMA in California during his visit there, asking why states can no longer handle their own issues like they always have before without being complete failures, and turning to the federal government and asking that they make the rest of us perpetually bail them out of the results of the fact that they can't pick a good horse to put into office?
Mr. President, without your help, they're only going to get $43,000 from the federal government, even if they have a half $1 million dollar.
You did something,
loss.
Brad, with every insurance company in the country left California. That's why you have no insurance, because you made it so impossible. People that think like you made it so impossible. And
Brad, me?
Every
Mr.
insurance
President,
company.
I don't know what
I'll tell you this.
about my thinking.
I've never seen a state where almost nobody has insurance. And I said, what happened? And they said like 6 months ago they all left. And 2 years ago they had different, quadrants, but they left. And you have very little insurance here. I mean, I've never seen anything like it.
We had a lot of insurance companies pull out, but I have no idea.
And the insurance companies actually have been warning you.
So the insurance companies are pulling out of California, but not everywhere. So the question you should be asking is, what are you doing in California to make it impossible for them to do business there?
So you're going to see us proposing both of those.
Like water. Little things like water. The party of common sense. See, we're the party of common sense. You're not, in all fairness.
Yes, sir.
We like water to put out fires. It's really quite efficient.
Yeah, you might want to, think about taking care of the basics of life. Just a thought. Also in the news, the CIA has concluded that COVID, which killed 7 million people, including 1.2 million Americans, did come from a lab. Thanks, Fauci. Gain of function was so worth it. All that death and no consequences. And concerning the IRS, Trump floated the idea, again, this is not being put into practice, it's just an idea, of getting rid of the federal income tax. And for most of our history, we did not have the federal income tax. Now, to be clear, I don't believe anyone could actually get this done, so I think it's wishful thinking. But maybe it's time to seriously rethink a lot of the things in this new era and at least have the discussion about them. Let everybody have to make their case rather than just accepting the status quo. Let's weigh the pros and cons of how we go about things and then decide. I mean, that seems like a reasonable approach to me.
He's going to be very rich again, and it's going to happen very quickly. It's time for the United States to return to the system that made us richer and more powerful than ever before. You know, the United States in 1870 to 1913, all tariffs, and that was the richest period in the history of the United States, relatively speaking. In other words, relatively. And they set up the Great Tariff Commission of 1887, and this commission had one function: what to do with all the money that we took in. It was so enormous that they had no idea. It was a blue ribbon committee. It was set up 1887, and what to do with all of the money that we had. And again, Teddy Roosevelt was a beneficiary, because when McKinley was killed, he took over this vast sum of money, and he did all of those national parks and all of the other things. And I'm not knocking him, but he was given a vast amount of money, and that was all made through tariffs. We had no income tax. The income tax came in 1913. As I said in my speech last week, instead of taxing our citizens to enrich foreign nations, we should be tariffing and taxing foreign nations to enrich our citizens. Does that make sense, right?
You don't necessarily have to go that route, but I don't see why we should have a problem with discussing it and everyone making a case for and against that method. Moving on to other topics. The wonderful world of gender. I have some good news here. All charges were dropped against Ethan Heim. Hip, hip, hooray. For the details of that story, see my previous episode, More Than Life, More Than Myself, Part 3, Trans Surgeries on Minors. This was a whistleblower who turned in his hospital for continuing to do trans surgeries on minors after it was barred in order to politically persecute him while his wife was expecting their first child. They tried to bust him with HIPAA violations, saying that he had violated patients' privacy, which was blatantly untrue. None of the information he produced had any of the personal information about the patients. It only had the proof that these surgeries were taking place in opposition to the law. He has now been released from that malicious prosecution, and he is owed a major apology. Trump signed an executive order saying that those with gender dysphoria cannot serve in the military, which some have been doing in order to finance their transitions with tax dollars. Now, that's only some of them. Some of them are there probably because, like other people, they have a fierce patriotism and want to serve their country. And those people have as much gratitude for me as any of our other veterans. But people with mental issues such as clinical depression are already barred from serving. And people with diagnosed mental issues will continue to be rejected for something as important as the military. It's just that now the exception that was being made for gender dysphoria will no longer be allowed. The same standards for any mental health condition should and will now apply to everyone. Another executive order protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation was signed. This means that there will be no more 8-year-olds being allowed to do permanent things to their bodies before they even understand what they're doing. You will have to be an adult before you can make those kinds of permanent decisions, which is right. All funding for this has been stopped by this executive order, but a full ban on these procedures will require Congress to pass a law. And now, DEI. DEI was ended in the military, and in response to that, some troublemakers tried to feign that they misunderstood what that meant and that they were to stop teaching about the Tuskegee Airmen in order to create this hoax and act like this was coming from the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, when he ordered the removing of wokeness from the military. He said that removing the Tuskegee Airmen was not his idea or his intention, and that it would not be allowed. This insincere removal of things like that in order to cause trouble is not acceptable, and he immediately reinstated teaching the Tuskegee Airmen, etc. The State Department also announced that there will be no DEI messaging during Black History Month. They will be highlighting the contributions of Black individuals without promoting the group as being somehow inherently superior. All people of all races are valued based on the content of their character and the merits of what they contributed alone, not just for the melanin in their skin. That irrelevant genetic characteristic neither makes you lesser or better. Another EO was issued to combat anti-Semitism in universities. They now have to abide by the Civil Rights Acts concerning Jews as well as other minorities. They will lose all federal funding if they do not comply. Free speech will not in any way be limited by this. Only things that are already against the law, like trespass or assault or blocking Jews from entering the classrooms, etc. This will no longer be tolerated if universities want to keep their federal funding. Universities that do not extend the protections of these civil rights laws to Jews will lose their federal funding, and they should. Another executive order ended DEI indoctrination in grades K through 12 and forbade the schools from usurping parental authority by socially transitioning minors behind their parents' backs. Schools who do not comply will lose their federal funding as well. Another executive order, by the way, extended the option of school vouchers, which is fantastic. School choice should be available to all. Poor people should not have their kids locked into a bad school district. Tragedy struck this week when a passenger jet belonging to American Airlines collided with a Black Hawk helicopter as it was trying to land at Reagan International Airport in Washington, D.C. The 3 soldiers aboard the Black Hawk and all of the airline passengers, including many world-level figure skating teams, 67 people in total, are presumed dead. One man was in the airport awaiting news of his wife, who was on board, as he was harassed by a reporter. Okay, I understand your job is to report on stories, but that should come second to basic humanity during a crisis like this. This reporter even asked to read the last text message that he got from his wife. What on earth makes you think that you have the right to even ask for something that personal for your own casual entertainment? It is disgusting to treat people like they are wind-up toys that are only there for your amusement, especially during a tragedy like this. You should be horrified in the level of shame you feel about yourself right now. The FAA is falling under fire for their DEI practices, including awarding extra points to applicants for having the lowest score in science during high school. That is according to documents presented in the Buttigieg lawsuit. Air traffic control has also been using DEI hiring practices, and as a result is seriously understaffed because they can't get enough diversity hires to meet the mandated quotas. The controller in this case was doing the job of 2 people. 77% of critical facilities are understaffed. Here is what our Vice President J.D. Vance had to say about that.
Something the president said that I think bears re-emphasizing, which is that when you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means on the one hand you're not getting the best people in government, but on the other hand it puts stresses on the people who are already there. And I think that is a core part of what President Trump is going to bring and has already brought to Washington, D.C. is we want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control, and we want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job. If you go back to just some of the headlines over the past 10 years, you have many hundreds of people suing the government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the color of their skin. That policy ends under Donald Trump's leadership because safety is the first priority of our aviation industry. Thank you, Mr. President.
The new Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, also chimed in.
We're not going to wait for all the information to come in from this vantage point, but to back up what the president said, what I've seen so far, do I think this was preventable? Absolutely.
So what were the results of this? An executive order was issued to end DEI in aviation. It also ordered an assessment of aviation safety and ordered that a new head of the FAA be appointed. There is no more of this botching up the Afghanistan withdrawal and still keeping your job. If you can't do the job to the standards that we have the right to expect from you, then you will be replaced and we will find someone who can. To be clear, people of all races and gender will still be able to have these jobs. There will not be any discrimination as long as you meet the standards. But we are not going to have quotas anymore that prioritize having the right quotas of each group at the expense of outcome. That is unsafe and people's lives are on the line. This is the audio from air traffic control on that flight.
Taxi 5, it's 0J in flight. Taxi 5, pass one is 0J.
This club has a aircraft in check, this is separation.
Please separate. American 4782 by Bath now for an visual. American 472 walking down 1 star 32017. West.
Crash. This is alert 3. Crash. This is alert 3. Crash. This is alert 3.
That's a little bit hard to make out without the subtitles, so what happened there was air traffic control notified the helicopter of the plane's location, and the pilot in the chopper acknowledged seeing it and said that he would avoid it. As he continued to approach, he was ordered to pass behind the plane, but the air traffic controller didn't give him much info about the current location of the plane or much time to respond. And then you heard the crash. It seems like the Black Hawk pilot either lost track of the plane in between the first communication and the second, or he was looking at the wrong plane all along. These pilots in the Black Hawk were also wearing night vision, which may have impeded their vision. Whatever happened, the Black Hawk was supposed to stay under the altitude of 200 feet in order to stay below descending planes that were trying to land. But the radar shows them being 100 feet higher than they were supposed to be. The chopper was also over the water of the Potomac instead of hugging the shore, which was the original flight path. Air traffic control also changed the runway of the plane from the usual one used for landing planes of this size coming in from this direction. So the plane was in an odd place trying to line up for the new runway. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of close calls in recent years. This is a clip from last April of air traffic control as they almost guide a plane on the runway into the path of a landing plane.
JetBlue 1554, step is pulls off your right. Wind calm, runway 4, cleared for takeoff. 226, left turn at November behind the Embraer, ground point 7. Left turn November behind the Embraer, ground point 7, 226.
Stop. Southwest 2937, stop.
We stopped. We were cleared to cross runway 4.
And we stopped at 1664.
As I said, there have been lots of these near misses. In 2023, there were 503 air traffic control lapses that were categorized by the FAA as significant, which is a 65% increase from the previous year. So clearly something has been going on to cause this massive increase. Whistleblowers have been screaming from the rooftops for a while now that the FAA has drastically cut the performance expectation standards and were manipulating racial hirings to meet certain quotas. One man was even exposed for helping black applicants, and only black applicants, by giving them the information ahead of time in order to ensure that more of them would pass and help make the numbers come out right. Another official openly talked about the importance of reducing the number of white males in the industry. Airlines have also been openly campaigning about their priority to adjust their employee ratios in order to make half of their pilots female or racial minorities. Priorities like this have seriously contributed to the massive understaffing that ends up with a controller trying to do two jobs at once. There have also been a steady streams of warnings in the form of near misses to back up these whistleblowers' claims. Just 24 hours before this catastrophe, a jet trying to land at the same airport had to divert and make a second attempt to land after almost colliding with a helicopter in its flight path, according to the Washington Post, just 24 hours before this incident happened. We don't want any discrimination, but we're tired of somebody's ledger being the priorities over our safety. You need to be hiring the best and most capable people, no matter who they are, or lives will be lost. And, for the record here, I'm going to get jumped all over for this, but from a scientific basis, the average woman does not have the same spatial reasoning abilities or the same speed of reflexes as the average man. That is a scientific fact. There are exceptions. But the average woman is at a disadvantage and should not be passed unless she is one of these exceptions, just to make someone's ledger come out right. I'm not prepared to die for your ideologies or that someone can feel good about themselves. Neither are most people. There was the airliner taking off from Hawaii several months ago who almost nose-dove straight into the ocean during takeoff as it was being piloted by a female diversity hire. Also, the insane idea of specifically hiring people with mental problems, because that's a minority group, in order to diversify the FAA is frickin' insane. Senior White House official Stephen Miller had this to say.
It is a betrayal of the American people to say that you are going to prioritize the hiring of people with severe intellectual defects to serve at the Federal Aviation Administration, the entity responsible for ensuring that every single passenger over American airspace safely takes off, safely flies, and safely lands. And President Trump has made clear that he's not only, and he issued another order today, he's not only installing the highest standards possible, but the order President Trump issued today tells the Secretary of Transportation to review every hiring decision at the FAA over the last 4 years. And where someone was not hired based on merit, qualification, or competence, then that person needs to be replaced.
This is the kind of insanity that happens when ideologies take over common sense. And like I said, I'm not prepared to die for your ideologies, and most people aren't either. Attempts were made to stir up a lot of unorganic controversy over the state of finances. Here's how it went down. Trump froze federal grants of $3 trillion to charities and universities, etc. This will not affect services such as Medicare. No doubt some people will try to use malicious compliance like they tried to with their stunt with Pete Hegseth and the Tuskegee Airmen, and I say, who cares? Those instances will be shut down and corrected with lightning speed, just like that one was. The only thing that's important is for people to recognize the stunts for what they are, meaningless sabotage. And when they arise, just note who is the one trying to fix the problems and who's the one trying to cause them. One of the programs impacted by this freeze is Biden's promise of $15 million to Taliban-controlled Afghanistan in order to buy contraceptives and condoms for them. Why is that my responsibility to fund their safe sex in the first place? This is exactly why Trump is suspending all foreign aid until it's been reviewed, with the exception of Israel and Egypt. We will provide aid on a case-by-case basis, but many countries need to become significantly less dependent on the United States and on my tax dollars and start dealing with their country's problems themselves. This is a viral clip of the former president of Kenya responding to the stop on aid. I very much appreciated his sane response.
People the other day crying, oh, I don't know, Trump has removed money. He said he's not giving us any more money. Watu wanalia. Why are you crying? It's not your government, it's not your country. He has no reason to give you anything. I mean, you don't pay taxes in America. He is appealing to his people. Shauri yenu bwana. This is a wake-up call for you to say, okay, what are we going to do to help ourselves? Instead of crying, tujiulize, what are we going to do? Haya, ametoa hiyo pesa, sasa tutafanya namna gani jameni? What are we going to do? To support ourselves. Because nobody is going to continue holding out a hand there to give you. It is time for us to use our resources for the right things. We are the ones who are using them for the wrong things.
Now that is the healthy reaction. It is both productive of what do we need to do in order to get our ducks in a row, as well as an acknowledgement that being dependent on somebody else's handouts is really not a good long-term strategy, and an acknowledgement of the fact that you don't pay taxes to the American government, so why do you expect the American government to give you benefits? Benefits from the government are for the people who are taxed by that government. Another perfect example of why we need these pauses in spending while we review the massive systemic BS that is going on is the $50 million of our tax money that was about to be sent to provide condoms for the people in the Gaza Strip. No. The left tries to justify this betrayal by claiming it's not just for condoms, it's for their sexual health. Whatever that means. Still a no. We have hurricane victims right here in the United States who need that money. And the population in Gaza has actually increased during this war because they like to use the condoms that we are paying to send them to make helium balloons that they can attach inflammatory materials to in order to set fires in Israel. No, I am not making that up. That is actually what they have been doing with the real condoms that we have been sending them. In 2024, $10 trillion was spent by our federal government, more than $3 million of which was on things like grants and loans and NGOs. Please see my episode on government waste if you want to be appalled about that. That is the American people's money. We have the right to say no to your insane ideas about spending it. It is not your personal piggy bank that you get to spend on your friends and your woke nonsense. All of these programs need to be reviewed. Medicare and Social Security are exempt. That's written directly into the order.
DOGE and OMB have actually found that there was $37 million that was about to go out the door to the World Health Organization, which is an organization, as you all know, that President Trump, with the swipe of his pen in that executive order, is no longer wants the United States to be a part of. So that wouldn't be in line with the president's agenda. DOGE and OMB also found that there was about to be 50 million taxpayer dollars that went out the door to fund condoms in Gaza. That is a preposterous waste of taxpayer money.
Yes, it is. More malicious compliance did end up happening when troublemaking bureaucrats shut down enrollment on the Medicaid website. They knew that was not part of the order, and Trump ordered them to reopen it because these issues were already spelled out. You know, the people who engage in these acts of malicious compliance should be tracked down, fired, and made big examples out of in order to de-incentivize this showy nonsense. We do not have time for games of bad actors who prioritize causing trouble through acts of bad faith. Saboteurs need to be dissed and dismissed, and most of all, disempowered. If you're going to be a child, go play by yourself in the naughty corner. We've got work to do. Come back when you're ready to roll up your sleeves and help like an adult. Meanwhile, the Libs immediately started freaking out over the idea of lower spending, calling it unconstitutional. Yeah, as I remember it, Biden tried to spend billions of dollars of the taxpayers' money in order to forgive student loans without that being authorized by Congress, who controls the purse strings and who are the people's representatives. And he continued to attempt to do this even after it was struck down by the Supreme Court, who said that it was unconstitutional. So, I really don't buy that you care all that much about the Constitution. Chuck Schumer certainly had nothing to say about that when that was going on his side. But Trump saying that we're going to spend less of the people's money is a constitutional crisis, according to him. Yeah, you libs just can't help but show exactly whose side you're on every chance you get, and it ain't the people's. Here is Chuck Schumer making an ass of himself.
The Trump administration is robbing Peter to pay the billionaires. American families make no mistake about it. The money being taken from them will be spent, but not on them. Instead of going to support for your community, it's going to the ultra-wealthy and the mega corporations. This is cruelty. This is lawlessness. This is a heist done on a national scale. No matter how much he may believe he does, the president does not have the authority to ignore the law, and we're going to fight this in every way that we can.
Examples. Chuck? Which poor people are losing money by this? Which wealthy people are gaining? Specifics, please. Not fear-mongering. Stealing money out of my pocket. Someone who is living well below the poverty line, unlike you, in order to pay for condoms in Gaza is fine, according to you. But not stealing the money out of my pocket for condoms in Gaza is a heist. Okay, let me think about that. Yep, I still want him not to spend my money. And since when were you concerned about the overreach of executive power? Was it when Biden tried to use OSHA, of all things, in order to mandate vaccines for the entire American workforce? Were you concerned about government overreach then? No. You break it, you buy it, baby. I don't like having a big executive branch of the government or it becoming disproportionately powerful the way that Obama made it. But I am not going to live in a world where left-wing governments get to abuse power when they have it, and right-wing governments are stuck with the results because they don't use that same power on moral grounds. Things need to be reined back in however that gets done. Either nobody uses executive power, which is my preference, or everybody uses it. The media has spent the entire week performatively shouting about the chaos and acting like everyone is about to die as a result of these spending freezes. They really just could not be further detached from reality and how the normies see everything if they tried. Which is a real problem when your entire industry depends on those normies believing that you're on their side and are telling them the truth. Here is Jake Tapper pretending to be hysterical, talking once again with Stephen Miller.
I just want to make sure I understand. So anybody out there that provides school lunches, anybody out there...
Yeah, there's zero impact on public benefit programs, full stop, as OMB has made clear. And I want to really drill down on this, Jake, because it's so important. Mm-hmm. There's 2 million employees in the federal government. Overwhelmingly, the career federal service in this country is far left-wing. I don't know that to be a fact. Well, I'll give you a great example. We looked at USAID as an example. That's 98% of the workforce either donated to Kamala Harris or another left-wing candidate, just as an example.
Okay, but imagine an entire workforce is having a...
Wait.
Yeah, you can't count the stats I don't like.
Someone voted for Kamala Harris is demonizing them?
No, so according to your suggestion is that there's a bias.
No, but you used the word demonizing. You just said that I'm demonizing somebody by saying they voted for Kamala Harris.
Let's get back on track.
But I am on track. Okay. Let me stay on track. What I'm saying to you is this. There are 2 million employees in the federal government.
Right.
They're overwhelmingly left of center. The American people... I got to finish the sentence.
Okay.
I got to finish the sentence. The American people voted for dramatic change implemented by Donald Trump. So it is essential for him to get control of government, to establish a whole-of-government process for Donald Trump's political appointees to review discretionary grants of spending for pet projects that are not directed by Congress.
Trump offered a buyout program to these federal employees who want to quit, which would allow them to be paid and retain their benefits through the end of September if they leave now and save us the costs of auditing them. The estimates are that about 5 to 10% of the federal workforce will take him up on that because many of them do not want to come back into the office and stop working from home. That alone would be a savings of around $100 billion.
As federal employees, they must meet a high standard. They're representing our government. They're representing our country. If they don't agree by February 6th to show up back to work in their office, they will be terminated, and we will therefore be downscaling our government, which is something that the last 10 presidents have tried very hard to do but failed. Most of the people we're talking about have not been going to their federal offices in many, many years, from even before COVID. But they have nevertheless been paid. Some have worked, some haven't worked, and most of the studies say that some have just gone through the motions. We may ask these people to prove that they didn't have another job during their so-called employment with the United States of America, because if they did, that would be unlawful.
96% of the government workforce has been working from home, and there is no way to know which of them have been using mouse wigglers and, like he said, going through the motions. There are jobs where you can work from home, and you have the freedom to choose that, but working for the federal government and working from home is not an option. Pick. This is the new press secretary responding to questions on the same subject.
Question about these buyouts. You've been describing it as this effort to get folks to return to work. The union that represents federal workers, though, says this isn't a voluntary buyout. They say this is a purge of people that don't agree with the president. What's your response?
That's absolutely false. This is a suggestion to federal workers that they have to return to work. And if they don't, then they have the option to resign. And this administration is very generously offering to pay them for 8 months. 6% of the federal workforce in the city actually shows up to work. That's unacceptable. We're all here at work at the office. There are law enforcement officers and teachers and nurses across the country who showed up to the office today. People in this city need to do the same. It's an overwhelmingly popular policy with people outside of Washington, D.C. The president campaigned on this, and his administration's keeping the promise.
Later in the week, in the face of courts beginning to challenge the pauses on grant funding, the memo was withdrawn in order to write a more specific one that can't be torn apart. But they are moving forward with the pauses on an individual basis that won't be as susceptible to challenges. In foreign affairs, Trump spoke about resettling Palestinians elsewhere until Gaza's rubble can be rebuilt, which would allow them to live in peace for a while. Maybe they'll learn to like it. The Palestinians already have a state. It was created 2 years before Israel got their own state. It's called Jordan, which is the obvious choice, as it is still 70% Palestinian to this day. Egypt would be another option for this temporary resettlement because it's the only place besides Israel that we haven't paused aid to, so we have leverage there. Qatar is the most fitting since they love Hamas radicals. So why doesn't the percentage of Gazans who still support Hamas and the October 7th violence go there? 2 Jews, including an 80-year-old hostage, were released along with 5 Thai hostages by Hamas. There is a disturbing video online of Gazan civilians mobbing and threatening the 80-year-old hostage as she was released. The innocent victims in action. The fate of the Bibas family is still unconfirmed and unknown. The Wall Street Journal reported that an Iraqi atheist who triggered massive protests by burning a Quran in 2023 in Stockholm has been shot and killed while live streaming on TikTok. He had been living under police protection ever since burning the Quran. The president there admits that this could have been done by a foreign power. Yes, I wonder which one. Big mystery. Yep, this is going to join JFK in the unknowable mystery section. 5 suspects have been arrested. Look, I don't think that people should be asses and burn what other people hold sacred just to be controversial. Likewise, I don't think that it is acceptable to act like a Stone Age barbarian and violently murder someone because they burned a book. We all know that if this guy, or some other atheist like Richard Dawkins, had burned a Bible, and a Christian had killed him in cold blood, this would be rightly, unanimously condemned by all sides. I don't see why Muslim radicals are supposed to be exceptions to the standards of human decency. In other news, the arms race just took a back seat to the AI race as China took a big leap forward this week by creating a superior AI on cheaper and less powerful microchips. Here we go. The heat is on. And lastly, the confirmations. These have been fun. Scott Bessent was confirmed as the Secretary of the Treasury. Lee Zeldin was confirmed as the head of the EPA. But most of the fun happened during RFK Jr.'s confirmation hearings, which started this week. There was initially concern about an idea that he supposedly supported to seize medical patents and give them to the competitors of the people who had created them in order to drive costs down. However, his staff claims that this is not true, that he does not support this idea, and that the whole thing is a smear campaign, which I hope is true. Caroline Kennedy tried to stop her cousin's appointment. Here is what she had to say.
I've known Bobby my whole life. We grew up together. It's no surprise that he keeps birds of prey as pets, because Bobby himself is a predator. He's always been charismatic, able to attract others through the strength of his personality, his willingness to take risks, and break the rules.
Falconry makes you a predator.
I watched his younger brothers and cousins follow him down the path of drug addiction. His basement, his garage, his dorm room were always the center of the action, where drugs were available, and he enjoyed showing off how he put baby chickens and mice in a blender to feed to his hawks. It was often a perverse scene of despair and violence. That was a long time ago, and people can change. Through his own strength and the many second chances he was given by people who felt sorry for the boy who lost his father, Bobby was able to pull himself out of illness and disease. I admire the discipline that took and the continuing commitment it requires. But siblings and cousins who Bobby encouraged down the path of substance abuse suffered addiction, illness, and death, while Bobby has gone on to misrepresent, lie, and cheat his way through life.
One question, Ms. Kennedy. Where was your concern about predators in your family, of which there have been many, when Uncle Teddy left a woman trapped in a car to drown? Or when multiple other cousins were accused of rape, etc.? In fact, doesn't your dad have some allegations in that area? You want to play? You've never spoken out against the disgusting people in your family before, so why is this the exception? Pretty unflattering display by you. Forgive me if I don't have any respect for or give much credence to this first ever breaking of the Kennedy wall. And given the circumstances, I just don't find your words all that compelling. In the South, we would go so far as to say, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. So let's just play some clips from the RFK Jr. hearing, shall we?
I don't want to take food away from anybody. If you like a McDonald's cheeseburger or Diet Coke, which my boss loves, and you should be able to get them. If you want to eat Hostess Twinkies, you should be able to do that. But you should know what the impacts are on your family and on your health. Okay.
I am a big supporter of the MAHA movement. I don't want people's choices taken away. I do want to have the information out there, and I want the healthy foods subsidized so that I can afford to eat something besides your toxins.
My approach to administration HHS will be radical transparency. If members of this committee or other members of Congress want information, the doors are open. I've spent many years litigating against NIH and its sub-agencies, HHS and its sub-agencies, NIH, CDC, FDA, on FOIA issues, trying to get information that we, the taxpayers, paid for, and oftentimes getting back redacted copies after a year or 2 years of litigation. That should not be the case, and if Congress asks me for information, you will get it immediately.
Transparency. I don't know why I should be opposed to that. Do you? You should not be able to pick and choose among the studies, selecting only the ones that have the results you want to be made public while sticking other ones into drawers. That's not how this works. The results of the studies should be public, regardless of whether or not they reflect what you want. Here is Bobby on abortion, of which he has been an outspoken advocate of the right to abortion up through birth, talking about how he would deal with the differences between his position and the administration's position, which he will be working for.
I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy. I agree with him that we cannot be a moral nation if we have 1.2 million abortions a year. I agree with him that the states should control abortion. President Trump has told me that he wants to end late-term abortions, and he wants to protect conscious exemptions, and that he wants to end federal funding for abortions here or abroad. That's Title X. I serve at the pleasure of the president. I'm going to implement his policies.
So he agrees with Trump on some things, he disagrees with him on other things, but he was not the one elected president, so he will be following the lead of the person who was elected president. Here he is on his position on vaccines.
I support the measles vaccine. I support the polio vaccine. I will do nothing as HHS secretary that makes it difficult or discourages people from taking either of those
Anybody
vaccines.
who believes that ought to look at the measles book you wrote saying parents have been misled into believing that measles is a deadly disease. That's not true.
I don't understand why those two things are considered contradictions. You can say that I do not want to take away anybody's ability to get the measles vaccine, and also say that not everything we've been told concerning that issue has been true and that we need more information. Those things are mutually compatible.
All these Democrats are opposed to me for partisan issues. They used to be my friends. Agreed with me on all the environmental issues that I've been working on for my whole career. Now they're against me because anything that President Trump does, any decision he makes, has to be lampooned, derided, discredited, marginalized, vilified.
That definitely seems true. I mean, if Trump came out tomorrow publicly supporting clothing, the next minute Democrats would all declare themselves to be nudists. That's the point we've gotten to in politics.
Americans don't, by and large, do not like the Affordable Care Act. People are on it. They don't like Medicaid. They like Medicare.
Yep.
And they like private insurance.
Yep.
We need to listen to what people, they would prefer to be on private insurance. Most Americans, if they can afford to be, will be on private insurance.
That's what the polls show.
We need to figure out ways to improve care, particularly for elderly, for veterans, for the poor in this country. And Medicaid, the current model is not doing that. I would ask, any of the Democrats who are chuckling just now, do you think all that money, the $900 billion that we're sending to Medicaid every year, has made Americans healthy? Do we think it's working for anybody?
Nope.
Are the premiums low enough?
He caught a little bit of flack for that last comment because there are no premiums in Medicaid. But his point is still right, that if you are feeding the people toxins, they are obese, they are diabetic, you have their trusted institutions telling them that Lucky Charms is healthy, that diet has nothing to do with health and diabetes, then you can throw all the money you want to at the medical system. It will never be able to catch up. That's just reality. But any temporary misspeaking was quickly forgotten as soon as the Dems took the mic. So my favorite clip, and I am begging you right now since I can only play the audio for you, I am begging you to go watch this clip in video. Bernie Sanders' eyes are bugging out like an old cartoon. They're like 2 feet in front of his head. It's ridiculous. Here's his big attack on RFK.
They are selling what's called onesies. These are little things, clothing for babies. Are you supportive of this?
I've had nothing to do with it.
Are you supportive of these onesies?
I'm supportive of vaccines.
Are you supportive of this clothing, which is militantly anti-vaccine?
I am supportive of vaccines. I will I want good science, and I want to protect.
But you will not tell the organization you founded not to continue selling that product. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That clip is going to live in infamy. Okay, first of all, RFK doesn't even have association with that company anymore. And Bernie's watched A Few Good Men too many times. He's clearly, desperately wanting his Jack Nicholson moment. Did you order the code onesie? You're damn right I did! What the bleep is wrong with you? You unbelievable weirdo. I'm actually supposed to take you seriously at this point. You're up there with your eyes bugged out ranting about an anti-vax onesie. You are never going to live this down, my man. Crashed and burned, Mav. I know, that's the wrong movie, but it's all Tom Cruise, so what difference does it make? Here was RFK's response to some of the attacks against him.
By the way, Bernie, the problem of corruption is not just in the federal agencies, it's in Congress too. Almost all the members of this panel are accepting, including yourself, are accepting millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical industry.
I thought that would go. No. I ran for president like you. I got millions and millions of contributions. They did not come from the executives, not one nickel of PAC money from the pharmaceutical industry. They came from workers.
Which is still pharmaceutical industry.
Because I had contributions from workers all over this country. Workers.
You were the
not a nickel from corporate
tax.
tax.
You were the single largest acceptor of pharmaceutical dollars.
No, from workers in
1.5 million.
Yeah, and why are the workers at all the pharmaceutical companies such big supporters, Bernie? Why? $1.5 million, my man.
There have been, as I understand it, dozens of studies done all over the world that make it very clear that vaccines do not cause autism. Now, you just said, if I heard correctly, well, if the evidence is there. The evidence is there. That's it. Vaccines do not cause autism. Do you agree with that?
As I said, I'm not going to go into HHS with any preordained.
I asked you a simple question, Bobby. Studies all over the world say it does not. What do you think?
Senator, if you show me those studies, I will absolutely, as I promised to Chairman Cassidy, I will apologize.
That is a very troubling response, because the studies are there. Your job was to have looked at those studies as an applicant for this job.
Yes, it's terribly troubling when somebody actually wants to look at the evidence. How dare they? How dare they? By the way, none of the studies that you cited ever looked at the problems caused by the combination of vaccines. Each one was studied in isolation. And considering that the autism rates have gone up at the exact same time that kids went from getting 12 vaccines before the age of 18 to 70, maybe a few new studies would be in order. After all, if they show what you say they'll show, what's the problem, my man? Tina Smith of Minnesota, you're up.
In an interview in 2023 and again in 2024, you blamed school shootings on antidepressants. You said, and this is a quote, "There is no time in American history or human history that kids were going to shoot schools and shooting their classmates. It really started happening coterminous with the introduction of these drugs, with Prozac and with other drugs." So do you believe, as you've said, that antidepressants cause school shootings? This should be a simple question.
I don't think anybody can answer that question, and I didn't answer that question. I said it
so your answer is...
I said it should be studied along with other potential culprits like
they may cause
social media. But I don't know. I would never make, because there's no science on that.
Well,
Senator.
there is, Senator. There is, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you for the promotion.
The science shows that there is no link between school shootings and antidepressants.
No, it does
in
not.
fact, most school shooters were not even treated with antidepressants.
Not
and
true.
Of those that were, there was no evidence of association. You know,
I don't think you
my
can
question
say that,
is,
Senator, because of HIPAA rules, nobody knows.
Okay, so what you want him to do is decide that there is no connection, that that's a lie before the studies are done, and then use that as the reason to not do the studies. So you just don't want people to have all the information before they decide to put something in their body? Why? What are you afraid the studies will show? Actually, before we play the next clip, there was a point I wanted to make. What she was trying to cite there, that there is not a link between school shootings and SSRIs, is based on studies where they deliberately manipulate the numbers. Here's how they do it. Gang violence is combined with school shootings. Now, gang violence happens almost every day and has completely different motivations. Turf wars, drugs, etc. So they flood the study with young people committing acts of gang violence on the street because that's considered a mass shooting, just like a school shooting is a mass shooting. And they say, well, most of these people are not on antidepressants. If you look at just the school shooters, most of them are on antidepressants. And if there is no link, explain to me why the warning labels for SSRIs say right on the label that this can cause violent thoughts. Why? If there's no link.
I know people, including members of my family, who've had a much worse time getting off of SSRIs than people have getting off of heroin. The withdrawal period is, and it's written on the label.
I have some experience with this myself. Mr. Kennedy, this is personal for me. When I was a young woman and I was struggling with depression, thankfully, I had the resources to help me get through it, including a new generation of SSRI uptake inhibitors, which helped to clear my mind, get me back on track to being a mom and a wife and a productive, happy person. And I'm really grateful for that therapy. So I have some experience with this, and I think that everyone should have access to that care. And your job as secretary is to expand access to care, not to spread lies and misinformation.
No, his job is to make sure that there are studies done and that we have all the information to make the choices that we decide is right for us. As long as no one will be stopped from being on an SSRI, and they will have access to that if that's what they choose, why do you care? Is it a problem if some people decide that they don't want to be on these drugs, as long as those who do want to be on them still can? Do you have stock in pharma or something?
Do you think physicians, when they make that prescription, ought to have access to good science?
Of course they do. And
that's all I believe, too. Then you and I are in agreement, Senator.
Continuing with the bickering.
The gold standard means real scientific research with replication of studies, which very rarely happens now at NIH. We should be giving at least 20% of the NIH budgets to replication.
Yep.
We should make sure that all the science is published with the raw data. We should make sure that the peer reviews are also published. And I'll give you a quick example. 20 years ago, NIH scientists did a study on Alzheimer's, which they said it was caused by amyloid plaque. After that, NIH shut down studies of any other hypothesis. 20 years later, we now know that those studies were fraudulent. NIH has funded 800 studies on a fraudulent hypothesis. And we've lost 20 years in figuring out a cure for Alzheimer's. And that's just one example. I could give you hundreds. We need to end that. We need to end the old boy system. We need to have replicatable science.
Scientific results are useless unless they can be duplicated to confirm that they were not a fluke. That is the way it has always been done up until recently.
What do you think is causing the avian influenza?
This will go to my office. I think the H5N1 viruses.
So that's good to hear, because in a recent book, I will submit this for the record because we don't have that much time, Mr. Kennedy has questioned the scientific basis for germs causing disease and the power of vaccines and antibiotics.
I've never questioned that, Senator.
Well, I will submit that for the record.
Submit the claim that you're pulling out of thin air. Why not read the book and show where it says what you claim it says? Elizabeth Warren, you want to take a shot?
I'm asking about fees from suing drug companies. Will you agree not to do that?
You're asking me to not sue drug companies,
no,
and I'm not going to agree to that,
drug
Senator.
Companies as much as you want.
I'm not going to agree to not sue drug companies or anybody.
And I'm asking you to commit right now that you will not take a financial stake in every one of those lawsuits so that what you do as secretary will also benefit you financially down the line.
I'll comply with all the ethical guidelines.
That's not the question. You have said
you're asking me, Senator, you're asking me not to sue vaccine pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, you are. That's exactly what you're doing.
No. Look, no one should be fooled here. As Secretary of HHS, Robert Kennedy will have the power to undercut vaccines and vaccine manufacturing across our country.
So you are asking him to do what no one does, including you, Miss Warren, and work for free anytime he sues a vaccine company for wrongdoing in order to discourage him from suing vaccine companies. What about the HPV vaccine that he was able to take to court despite the blanket protection that usually makes them exempt from being held responsible for their wrongdoing? This vaccine case had so many blatant lies, corruption, and horrific side effects that it went to court anyway, despite the usual protections, and is currently awaiting verdict from the jury. And you, Elizabeth Warren, are almost in tears at the idea of the facts coming out, good and bad, and pharmacy companies being held accountable for committing wrongdoings. You are almost in tears at the idea of them being allowed to be sued. Well, then again, this is the woman who put on the performative show of claiming to be Native American for years, so what do you expect? It's just interesting to see which causes bring you to hysterics and which ones don't. Moving on, Kash Patel confirmation hearings have also started. They had some interesting moments. Here was his opening statement.
For the first 8 years after law school, I served as a public defender, first for Miami-Dade County and later for the Southern District of Florida. During that time, I represented some pretty awful human beings, charged with some pretty heinous crimes. But what I learned there was the core value that has been enshrined in me since, that due process must be provided without bias to all Americans. And if we cannot provide due process to the worst, then there can be no due process for anyone. And our constitutional republic fails. Senator, this may be one of the scenarios that most uniquely qualifies me to take command at the FBI. Having been the victim of government overreach and a weaponized system of justice and law enforcement, I know what it feels like to have the full weight of the United States government barreling down on you. And as the Biden Inspector General determined those activities by the FBI and DOJ were wholly improper and not predicated upon law and facts, I will ensure, if confirmed, that no American is subjected to that kind of torment, to that kind of cost, financially and personally. And most importantly, I will make sure that no American is subjected to death threats like I was, and subjected to moving their residences like I was, because of government overreach, because of leaks of information about my personal status. If confirmed as FBI director, Mr. Chairman, you have my commitment that no one in this country will feel that pain.
Here is what he had to say about the assault on parents' rights in 2020 in Virginia.
Will you find out who was involved in this policy within the FBI, who agreed with it, who implemented it, who encouraged it? Will you find out that, Mr. Patel? Will you do an internal investigation? And will you make clear that those who supported this policy are appropriately disciplined? And will you make clear that the FBI will never do something like this again?
If confirmed and pursuant to your congressional request, absolutely, Senator.
Thank you.
So here's the Democrats lining up for their shot at him.
Before I call on Senator Lee,
could he just answer the question if he said that the FBI headquarters where they investigate cybercrime and terrorism should be shut down and open as a deep state, as a museum? Did he say that the headquarters should be shut down?
Mr. Chair,
I deserve an answer to that question. He is asking to be head of the FBI, and he said that their headquarters should be shut down.
Then shut your mouth and let him answer.
Mr. Chair, parliamentary inquiry. You got anything you want to say, Mr. Patel, before I go on to Senator Lee?
Simply this. If the best attacks on me are going to be false accusations and grotesque mischaracterizations, the only thing this body is doing is defeating the credibility of the men and women at the FBI. I stood with them here in this country. In every theater of war we have, I was on the ground in service of this nation. And any accusations leveled against me that I would somehow put political bias before the Constitution are grotesquely unfair. And I will have you reminded that I have been endorsed by over 300,000 law enforcement officers to become the next director of the FBI. Let's ask them.
Mr. Chairman, I am quoting his own words from September of 2024. It is his own words. It is not some conspiracy. It is what Mr. Patel actually said himself. Facts matter.
You forget that you had 3 minutes in the next round to say what you just said.
Okay, I'll say them again.
What a self-smug loudmouth. Apparently she thinks she made some sort of point there, but she's obviously short of enough IQ points to realize that she didn't. Didn't go any better the next time around.
The only thing that will matter if I'm confirmed as a director of the FBI is a de-weaponized, depoliticized system of law enforcement completely devoted to rigorous obedience of the Constitution and a singular standard of justice. As we discussed in our private meeting, Senator, I have always rejected any violence against law enforcement, and I have, including in that group, specifically addressed any violence against law enforcement on January 6th, and I do not agree with the commutation of any sentence of any individual who committed violence against law enforcement.
So do you think that America is safer because these 1,600 people have been given an opportunity to come out of serving their sentences and live in our communities again?
Senator, I have not looked at all 1,600 individual cases. I have always advocated for imprisoning those that cause harm to our law enforcement and civilian communities.
However, Alex Padilla took the cake.
Mr. Patel, do you believe that background checks for firearm purchases are constitutional?
I don't know the in-depth of it, but I think that's what the Supreme Court has said, Senator.
So the word would be Y-E-S, yes. Can you say yes? Are background checks constitutional?
I can say whatever the Constitution and the Supreme Court ruled is the rule of the land.
Who do you think you are, you condescending prick? You little egotistical dictator. He's a human being, and he doesn't have to repeat your exact words back to you like a kindergartner. This sort of condescending disrespect for everyone around you is a big part of why every person who is sane has left the Democrats, even lifelong staunch liberals. I'm going to stop before I say something that I'll be ashamed of years from now. Not a good look.
I want you to turn around. There are Capitol Police officers behind you. They're guarding us. Take a look at them right now.
Adam Schiff.
Turn around.
I'm looking at you. You're talking to me.
No, look at them. I want you to look at them if you can, if you have the courage to look them in the eye, Mr. Patel, and tell them you're proud of what you did. Tell them you're proud that you raised money off of people that assaulted their colleagues, that pepper sprayed them, that beat them with poles. Tell them you're proud of what you did, Mr. Patel. They're right there. They're guarding you today. Tell them how proud you are.
That's an abject lie, and you know it. I've never, ever accepted violence against law enforcement. I've worked with these men and women, as you know.
You glorify it.
Turn around. Say this. Say that. Pat your head. Rub your tummy. Dance, peasant, dance. By the way, Kash Patel's answer to this is the correct one. Refuse to play morons' games. This is all show for TikTok, and it is not a good look. Our last confirmation is Tulsi Gabbard. Admittedly, I don't know a whole lot about her. I've only seen 3, I believe, interviews with her. But her confirmation hearings have started as well. Here she is.
Before I close, I want to warn the American people who are watching at home. You may hear lies and smears in this hearing that will challenge my loyalty to and my love for our country. Those who oppose my nomination imply that I am loyal to something or someone other than God, my own conscience, and the Constitution of the United States, accusing me of being Trump's puppet, Putin's puppet, Assad's puppet, a guru's puppet, Modi's puppet, not recognizing the absurdity of simultaneously being the puppet of 5 different puppet masters. The same tactic was used against President Trump and failed. The American people elected President Trump with a decisive victory and mandate for change. The fact is, what truly unsettles my political opponents is I refuse to be their puppet. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible. Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics. Personally, just 24 hours after I criticized Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Sadly, there are more examples. The bottom line is this: this must end.
Yeah, targeting Catholics for going to a traditional Latin Mass sounds like something the Soviet Union would do. And I remember when Tulsi, as a representative of her state of Hawaii, was put on a terrorist watch list for flying in retribution for not towing her party's line. She is a former Democrat. And here is the part that most people will be interested in, her opinion on Snowden.
So let me ask you again, do you believe, as the chairman of this committee believes, as the vast majority of members of our intelligence agencies believe, that Edward Snowden was a traitor to the United States of America?
Senator, if confirmed as Director of National Intelligence, I will work with you to make sure that there is not another Snowden like leak.
Media, it's not a moment to propagate
so stop showboating. Let her answer.
Conspiracy theories or attacks on journalism in the United States. This is when you need to answer the questions of the people whose votes you're asking for. to be confirmed as this
Stop
chief
rambling,
intelligence
shut up, and let her
officer
answer.
of this nation. Is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America? That is not a hard question to answer when the
Shut
stakes
your
are
pie
this
hole,
high.
Irene.
Senator, as someone who has...
Your
Oh,
answer
good
yes or
grief.
no, is Edward Snowden a traitor to the United States of America?
As someone who has
I'll go on
worn
to
our
my
uniform
question.
in combat, I understand how critical our national security
Apparently
is.
you don't.
Not a good look. I mean, she could not get out a syllable. Every time she started to make just the first sound of the first letter, he cut her off again. Answer me! Well, I don't... Blah, 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 blah. What an ass. Go ahead. Keep doing this. Keep doing this. By the way, just for the record, I don't know a lot about Snowden. What I do know about him is that whistleblowing is good. And the information that he provided, a lot of it was things we needed to know. But there are procedures for the correct way to go about whistleblowing, and he did it the wrong way, which does mean that he did commit treason in the legal sense. Both those things can be true at once. He should have blown the whistle. He shouldn't have done it in the way he did. We needed to know the things he said, but he should have done it the right way. And he definitely should not have taken classified information with him to adversaries like China and Russia. Here was Tom Cotton of Arkansas.
I'm dismayed by the attacks on Miss Gabbard's patriotism and her loyalty to our country. For instance, Hillary Clinton has smeared Miss Gabbard, calling her an asset of a foreign nation. Let me remind everyone that Miss Gabbard has served in our Army for more than 2 decades. She has multiple combat tours, and she still wears the uniform to this day. She has undergone 5 FBI background checks. I spent more than 2 hours last week reviewing the latest, putting eyes on more than 300 pages. It's clean as a whistle.
Can't help but notice the difference in demeanor there. Hysterics and showboating versus rational, professional, controlled evidence. And yeah, after 5 background checks, if there was something to turn up, it would have turned up. All right, final story has to do with our new 27-year-old press secretary. Her name is Caroline Leavitt, and according to the left, she's too pretty. Careful, guys, your misogyny is showing. She is qualified, they admit, but if she was ugly, the job wouldn't have been open to her, they claim. You didn't have a problem when Joe Biden publicly said that only a black woman would have the vice presidency open to her, which was his reason for choosing Kamala. In fact, your whole party has become about judging people on their outward, immutable characteristics. I mean, there's no evidence for your claims in this case that if she was unattractive, she wouldn't have been selected. But just for the sake of argument, if that was true, how is it different from what you do every day and present to the world as being virtuous? So, yep, no, doesn't land. Better luck next week. Here is a couple of clips of our new press secretary as she announced that the new administration would be making deliberate efforts to give the new alternative media access and would no longer be favoring legacy media. They will now be treated equally.
Since you brought up Truth Seek, I would like to point out, while I vow to provide the truth from this podium, we ask that all of you in this room hold yourselves to that same standard. We know for a fact there have been lies that have been pushed by many legacy media outlets in this country about this president, about his family, and we will not accept that. We will call you out when we feel that your reporting is wrong or there's misinformation about this White House. So, yes, I will hold myself to the truth, and I expect everyone in this room to do the same.
Here's another example of that refreshingly clear-cut honesty.
Really glad you brought this up, because there is a lot of reporting out there that is putting the onus on this White House for the increased cost of eggs. I would like to point out to each and every one of you that in 2024, when Joe Biden was in the Oval Office, or upstairs in the residence sleeping, I'm not so sure, egg prices increased 65% in this country. We also have seen the cost of everything, not just eggs. Bacon, groceries, gasoline have increased because of the inflationary policies of the last administration. As far as the egg shortage, what's also contributing to that is that the Biden administration in the Department of Agriculture directed the mass killing of more than 100 million chickens, which has led to a lack of chicken supply in this country, therefore a lack of egg supply, which is leading to the shortage.
All right, I'm going to leave you with a clip of J.D. Vance making the media round, as we discussed earlier. I love when he does this, because he looks so based, and they look so fringe. Here we go.
But there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society. And I think the profound difference that Donald Trump brings to the leadership of this country is the simple concept, America first. It doesn't mean you hate anybody else. It means that you have leadership, and President Trump has been very clear about this, that puts the interests of American citizens first. In the same way that the British Prime Minister should care about Brits and the French should care about the French, we have an American president who cares primarily about Americans, and that's a very welcome change.
What is President Xi doing? What is with Vladimir Putin?
He's looking after the Chinese. Putin is looking after the Russians. They're entitled to do that. Thank God we now have an American president who's looking after the citizens of his own country.
Yes, true. Not controversial. Should you allow your own child to starve in order to feed a stranger on the other side of the world if you had to choose one? You're responsible for your kid. The stranger, although your heart would obviously go out to him, isn't your responsibility in the same way that your child is. Helping him is generous kindness. Taking care of your child is mandatory. Is your argument, well, you don't have to choose? I agree. Most of the time you don't. So why do so many people object to the priorities being what he listed? Family first, then community, then fellow countrymen, then broader mankind. If you admit that you don't have to choose, that just because you're lower on the totem pole doesn't mean you don't eventually get to them. Why do you care enough to demand that these priorities be reversed? I tend to think that it's because when they're reversed, you don't have to do anything real and shoulder any real responsibilities or work to act in love instead of, posting meaningless hashtags and pretending that that's you loving the whole world. As we have previously discussed, love isn't a feeling. It's a verb. It's an action. And if there's no action behind it, it means nothing and is worth nothing. Thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and follow, because that is what makes these things successful. And I hope you come back next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.